Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to our second official State of the Church address. I'm Pastor Donald, and it is an honor to come into your home today. Whether you're listening through YouTube or Zoom, we're glad you're watching and listening. And friends, we had 4 months of strictly online worship from mid-March to mid-July, and now we've officially had a little more than a month since we started allowing outdoor worship. And I know it's been oh so joyous to see you all in person. I know I certainly missed that, and I can't tell you how many of you have expressed gratitude for being able to see one another, even if with masks and socially distanced. From the very start of this pandemic, and as we continue making decisions that will impact us collectively, we want to remind you that the health and safety of those who are part of our church and those who visit our church will be our number one priority. And even though we've started gathering outside, we haven't rushed to come inside the building yet, even though many are wondering when we will. And even though some of you are sad that we did only online for the 2 Sundays that it rained, we were not in a place where we felt comfortable or ready to have indoor worship yet. But as you know, we've been trying out different things and we've been learning as we go, including working with a new YouTube channel. And there's a number of churches, my wife included, along with United Methodist churches in our actual district that aren't regathering for in-person worship till 2021 even, until there's a vaccine, until it's able to be distributed. And we realize it's different for every church, and every church do what's right for them, depending on their size and context. And some started meeting before us, and some are not meeting until long after us. But we did want to hear from you, and we wanted to put out a survey last week to, number one, hear about your comfortability level coming into the church versus staying inside, or just versus staying outside. And number two, to just get your opinion on singing in the church, which is a big contention point for many lately, and one that a lot of people disagree on. Now, as a preface, I'd like to offer an analogy that I think will be helpful. And we use this in our survey as well, this language. So we're all on this road to regathering together as we continue along each week and each month. And we're going to hit some traffic lights along the way at certain points, right? So green, as you know, means go. Yellow means go faster, or actually slow down, right? Proceed with caution. Red means stop. And there are 3 different groups of people when it comes to how they view COVID and regathering for church at times. So I think this is a helpful analogy, right? For some, the light is red. For some, the light is yellow. For some, the light is green. Now, green light people are kind of those front runners. They're the risk takers. They probably aren't as concerned with wearing a mask or using hand sanitizer. They might think COVID is a bit overblown and that we need to get back to normal as soon as possible. So when it comes to regathering for worship, green people are the first in line back to church, not only for outdoor worship, but for indoor. And they're saying, no worries, no fear, all systems go. Yellow light people believe there are still good reasons to be cautious and have kind of a let's take it slow and see how it goes approach. They take common sense precautions, they wear a mask, they obey CDC guidelines, social distancing. And yellow, are very glad we're regathering, but those people will be ready to come back consistently oftentimes, even though they're still a little bit cautious. Now, red light people are those who are still not wanting to leave their homes to come to church because the risk just isn't worth it to them, or because they just want to have one less point of contact for them. Red sees the hot spots around our nation and maybe says, see, this thing ain't over by a long shot. Or they may have underlying health problems or have a family member close by or in their home who has underlying health problems. And so they might not return to worship until after kind of an all clear vaccine is given. And, I remember talking to someone recently who, because they are, wanting to visit their new grandson, they're wanting to make sure that they minimize contact wherever possible. So they may not necessarily be plopping a chair out during outdoor worship. Or I heard of one person who actually takes care of their mother each and every weekend, and they really don't want to expose themselves to one more gathering in the midst of the reality that they're caring for. Indoors for a longer time, there are some people that might choose to worship from home even, or in another way through Zoom or YouTube for quite some time. But speaking of traffic lights, even though there is a closer statistic in terms of willingness to come inside and outside. So us for Montville UMC, about 80% of you said, yes, I'm willing to come inside. or not inside. I'm willing to come outside for service in September if we have outside services. But the inside question, you all answered about 60% of you were willing to come inside. And considering only about 33% were willing to come inside 2 months ago, that's a lot of progress in terms of people's comfortability level compared to what it was. And so 80% said, yes to outside, 60% inside. And interestingly enough, for the singing question, we also asked you if you weren't allowed to sing congregational hymns when we, came inside, whenever that date ends up being, that 70% of you said you'd still be willing to come inside even if we couldn't sing. But speaking of traffic lights, once again, there were differences in regards to what traffic light you described yourself as. And so for the question of regathering in the church building right inside the sanctuary, 38% of you are green, 52% of you are yellow, and 10% of you are red. Now, when asking about singing inside the building, and you know what? There it is. 66% of you said you're green, that you think singing in the sanctuary is perfectly fine, so long as masks are kept on. 10% of you said yellow, you think singing is okay if done minimally and or done toward the end of service. And 24%, about a fourth, said they don't think those coming for worship in the sanctuary should sing at all. And so one thing that's a benefit for Montville, whenever we do end up coming inside, even though we might be a smaller space inside, we do have a lot of ventilation, a lot of windows, which will help with airflow and whatnot. And can obviously expand the back, putting chairs back toward where the fellowship hall is. But that information was really helpful for us to know, just to hear your perspective on where you're at in terms of singing and also comfortability inside versus outside, and to see how that's changed over the course of the past 2 months. But what I'm about to share with you, I want you to consider to be more of a game plan. I'm not an architect with a blueprint. I'm a coach with a game plan. So an architect with a blueprint means that it's going to look exactly like this with precise details. But a coach with a game plan means we have to remain flexible and be willing to call different plays as the game time conditions shift and change. We know that the landscape of COVID-19 is always changing. It seems like sometimes week to week. And so we'll always adjust wherever needed. We'll be flexible where needed. And especially if it's to put your health and safety first, we're going to adapt and be flexible with that. So know this game plan is subject to change. And if that's not a big asterisk you're used to seeing in these pandemic times, I don't know what is, because we've been hearing a lot lately, I'm sure. But as you know, New Jersey has made significant progress in flattening the curve, and we praise God for that, even as we mourn the fact that many others are seeing a spike in cases now. And we're not nearly back to normal in this upside down time we find ourselves, but people have been venturing outside now. They're out walking, jogging, swimming at the beach, getting their hair cut, shopping inside, dining outdoors, and those are encouraging signs of progress. We are interested to see what happens at schools. I will say that. We know some schools are gathering in person, some are doing only virtual, some a combination of the two. We know here in Montville, the elementary schools are going in person, junior high, high school, virtual. But, we're interested to see what happens in these first weeks of school gathering again, not just in our community, but across the state. But as of now, our plan for continuing to regather is the following. And so here we go. This is kind of where we're at as we look to the month ahead. So we here at Montville UMC are planning for another full month of outdoor worship. So pretty much all of September, you can expect to be outside. So that means before October, if it does happen to rain, we will be having strictly online worship from home. So as long as it's not raining, we will have outdoor worship. And I did hear from a couple that, they'd love to see us go inside during the month of September if it's raining. And if that's you, I encourage you to reach out to me and let me know. We can talk a bit more extensively. We'd love to hear from you if that's your perspective, and also share a little bit more detail of kind of where our regathering team is coming from, and also the differences we had in our conversations. But I will say there are still things that need to happen before we're completely ready to come inside. We've taken some action steps, and we're grateful for those on our regathering team who've helped to take some of those. There's actually some legal related things that we were even just informed of more so these past 2 weeks that we want to ensure we're thinking about, and also making sure we're protected in case anything were to happen, right? Because God forbid if we opened our doors and someone got COVID, right, there could be a lawsuit involved. And not that that person would always come in from a negative place. Perhaps they're just doing it because they don't have the money to afford their medical bills. But nonetheless, right, if there is a worst case scenario, we need to be prepared for it and make sure we're mindful of what Church Mutual is saying, our property insurance company, and making sure we have all our ducks in a row and are ready even for that should we come inside, which we're going to need to, obviously, because weather's getting colder. We can't stay outside forever. But also want to let you know that because of the nature of what September will bring, it really makes sense to continue outside for this month, even though a lot are willing to do inside, because we got Labor Day, right, the first week of September. And so there's going to be a lot of people away, and it's likely we wouldn't have the volunteer support, especially that day. The second Sunday of September is going to be Blessing the Backpacks, and we want to make sure that families who can participate in that feel comfortable being a part of a service. And we know that having an outdoor service is going to be a more welcome thing than inside if we did something. And the third Sunday of September, we're going to be doing our confirmation celebration service. As you know, we couldn't do that back in May, and so we're excited for that. But we want families and people to feel comfortable coming out for that. And so, if an outside service is where we can get more, we want to do that. But also, to be honest with you, for our church at Montville, many of you filled out in that first couple surveys we had about your willingness to volunteer, and we so thank you for expressing your willingness to volunteer and lead in certain ways. But there are, many respects in which we need to bolster up the volunteer base that it would take to do inside worship well. And so that's another big factor for us that was kind of a very clear thing in September. Like even if we wanted to come inside, I don't think we have the support we need right now to do it well. And obviously once summer is through, that opens the door more because people are around more, less away or on vacation. And so we'll continue building that volunteer support system whenever we end up coming inside, especially as we get toward the colder months. But that's kind of our game plan right now. So once again, outdoor worship continuing through September. Know that we're going to be working on things to prepare us for inside whenever that day happens. But by the way, so the Blessing of the Backpack service, which will be September 13th, we won't be asking your child or grandchild to come up to the front or bring their backpack forward, but we're going to invite them to hold their backpack, maybe even have the parents, guardians, grandparents bless them or lay hands on their child or backpack as we kind of have a repeat after me prayer of blessing these kids and their backpacks as they head into a new school year. But we will, on September 13th, have a special bag that we will want to put in your child or grandchild's backpack that will be a month's worth of Sunday activities. So for our church, we have, as of now, decided that we're going to offer potentially some opportunities in the fall for gathering outside for our older youth, but not necessarily for younger kids. We still have to work out that, and if there's something we can do. We know our younger ones aren't the best at social distancing and things like that. And it's usually helpful for that group to have things that are more hands-on, crafts, and when you can't do that because you're minimizing contact, it makes things more complicated. But that's why for our little ones and parents, grandparents, guardians of our younger children, we are planning to put things in your hands and backpacks that you can bring to church and do at church on a Sunday, or do from home if you're worshiping online from home. But for our older children and youth, if they end up coming, the Sunday school experience is going to be much more conducive to being conversational and working well that way, even if you can't do as much of the hands-on. So we do hope to bring something for our youth in the fall. And obviously we've got special Sundays, the 13th and 20th, so everyone will be in service, and we won't be having anything special outside of that in terms of Sunday school. But maybe the last Sunday of September and perhaps in October, but we'll keep you posted in mid-September as we get closer to that. Now, I will say, let's see. I want to make sure I'm touching all the points. So one thing I do want to mention, and this is more, less statistic and just more big idea consideration. So whenever we regather inside, and as we continue meeting outside for the time being, here's the thing I want to get across to you. More than the when of regathering and when we will actually come inside the building, I'm always much more concerned about the how of regathering. And I don't just mean how in the protocols, but I'm talking about how as kind of a spiritual matter of character, much more than just a simple matter of calendaring, which is what the when is. And so mindful of this how about this spiritual matter of our regathering, as your pastor, more than the date we set to move from outside to inside, I'm concerned with how we honor and respect each other's needs in the process of returning for worship, right? And so because we have people in our church that are all different levels of comfort with regathering, I've heard from people who are loving the outdoor services but are still eager to go indoors. I've heard from people who think we should stay outside as long as the weather allows us to, and so many other perspectives. And one thing I really appreciated that came through in the surveys you guys put out is a lot of you kind of put trust to us that, yeah, I'm comfortable coming inside or outside because I know you guys are going to do what you need to do, that you're going to follow protocols. I trust that you've got our best intentions in mind. And so I appreciated reading a lot of those. And, if you're part of our church family, if you're a follower of Christ, perhaps you're familiar with the Philippians 2:3 passage, which says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves." Or as another translation puts it, value others or think of others as more important than yourselves. In other words, as we continue to regather for worship, whether it be outside for September or inside later on, it is vital that we take into consideration the needs of others, especially the needs of others as being more important than our own preferences. In fact, here's a practical way to put it. Think of the most vulnerable person in your life, the MVP, if you'll say. When you return to church, you don't want to take the precautions that you're comfortable with, but you want to take the precautions that would make the most vulnerable person in your life comfortable. And so the grace and patience we show each other in the process of regathering at every point of the way runs much deeper than the dates and details of the phase we're in. And let's be honest, there may be some of you that sort of roll your eyes when you hear that because we've all been under a lot of pressure. We've all had to sacrifice so much during this pandemic. And, maybe you're thinking, oh, now Pastor Donald's telling me to think of other people's preferences as more important than mine. Many of you might be saying, well, but what about my preferences, my opinions? I have my pressures, my patience is wearing thin. And if people don't share my perspective, well, then, forget that, right? Perhaps that's you and how you're feeling at times. But I don't think God cares as much about the when of our regathering inside, back in the sanctuary, as much as God cares about the how, about the spiritual matter of why we're doing it, how we're approaching it. And so can I ask you, how do you regard others who have a different perspective from you, who are a different traffic light signal than you? Because this church runs the spectrum. As you heard in the stats, we have people all over the map with all sorts of opinions and feelings. And when it comes to how we will continue to regather, all different kinds of traffic lights. And that's why Philippians 2 is important, because it tells us how we honor one another as brothers and sisters. But the point perhaps of that passage is not to go around telling people your color and trying to persuade them to change theirs. But the way we honor Christ is by honoring and respecting one another's needs and their perspectives as well, treating them even more important than our own. And here's the key too. Even though we may have a majority this way or that way at any point in this regathering process, Montville UMC is not a green, yellow, or red church. We are a traffic light church with all lights on. And the way we practice Philippians 2:3 represents that. And it's a challenge because COVID is polarizing. If you haven't noticed, people are getting tired. It's getting very political at times. And, in another passage in 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul saw that the local church that he was over was being divided by different opinions about how they should live. And so some of them were fierce libertarians. We want freedom to do what we want. Others were more conservative. And so Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 10:23 through 24, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but the good of others. And so that passage maybe might speak, hey, you're free to have your perspectives. You have that right, but not everything might be beneficial or constructive. And so once again, we want everyone not to seek their own good, but the good of others. And so as your pastor, let me encourage you as we continue to move forward in this pandemic, in this upside down time we're in, prioritize the needs of others, learn what others' traffic light color is, and respect and honor them as a way of honoring Christ. In church, whether you agree with our kind of taking it slow approach that seems to be more yellow than green, don't let COVID divide us. Please, by all means, try to keep the unity of spirit through the bond of peace. And we do look forward to continuing to see you for outside worship during the month of September. And know that even in September, when we're gathering outside, we are going to be continuing to do preparations that will help us be ready to go when inside worship comes, when those cold days roll around. And so, we've been so grateful once again to be able to see you in person. Those who are still worshiping from home, we're so grateful that you can still be connected to us, even in the midst of this crazy time we're in. And we do hope if you haven't joined us for an outside service, that you'll consider joining. And if you're someone who is still more comfortable staying at home, know that we bless you and we love you. And we're so glad you could be connected with us. But we're excited for what's ahead. We know it's a new school year for our students and teachers. We know that God is up to something in every season we find ourselves in. And so I wonder what God is up to in this new and difficult and strange territory we find ourselves in. But friends, we look forward to the days ahead and the weeks ahead. And come what may, God is with us and we have each other as well. And so encourage you if you want to ask questions. Obviously, I didn't go through nitty gritty of all the things that people said. Know that we received all that feedback and it was very, very helpful to see and hear and read through. And we're going to keep keep that and make sure that's in the back of our minds as we continue doing things. Obviously, we're not going to tell you what we're doing for inside worship just yet, but we've got a lot of your feedback that's going to help us, best inform you and, influence our decisions, whatever those are, as we move forward, trying to do what is the best possible for the most possible people. But we're grateful that you tuned in with us, whether YouTube or Zoom today, and we hope you have a blessed and wonderful rest of your night. Bye, everyone.